Hey everybody, back again. It's the guy with beard, guns, gear. I didn't really want to do this video. I did sometimes and then I didn't, and I'll tell you the reasons why. Because it's, in my mind, extremely controversial. It's not very popular right now. It seems like it's very divisive. There's people that are, I'm going to say, pro firearms, or while understanding the dangers of firearms and the dangers that those can potentially, exist. But then there's the other side, and so it's almost getting as bad as talking about politics or religion in the household right now. And unless you know your audience, I would really hesitate on bringing this up. I'm going to say, an amateur firearms enthusiast. And what I mean by amateur is nobody's paying me to do what I enjoy doing. I'm a hunter. I'm a sports shooter. A sports shooter. I like to go to the range and I like to shoot rounds for no other reason than putting holes in paper. So I thought about how to integrate kind of, I'm not going to say a rant, but if I go off on a rant, I've already instructed my son who's behind the camera to kind of give me a chill pill sign. So I'm not going to go off on a rant, but I want to kind of provide some information, and especially my American friends out there and family that are watching. A lot of you guys have questions about what we can actually have in Canada. In fact, I've had people comment on my posts, "I don't understand, why do you have a handgun if you can't defend yourself with it?" I mean, it seems to me to be a very, kind of weird way of looking at it, but I'm Canadian. I do not have that, and I'm going to say fantastic document that Americans have in the Constitution. So we don't have in Canada a Second Amendment. We don't have a bill that protects us and our property even. I mean, even those rights are kind of, well, they were never rights, they're privileges, but our Canadian privileges are being stripped away. And especially in recent years with the current government, their approach does not seem to be logical or based in any kind of research or statistics or support. So that's why I'm here today. I'm gonna shout out to my American friends out there that you guys are watching. God love you. And I've had a couple of people suggest, well, you should pack up and move to the south. And believe me, if it got to that point where there's nothing left anymore and I can't enjoy what I enjoy doing, I would definitely consider it, because it's something I grew up with. And speaking of that, when I grew up, I lived in a rural community. Everywhere I went, everybody had firearms. Okay, you go into somebody's house and you'd see the rack on the back of the wall as soon as you came in, and there'd be a shotgun there, a rifle, and a .22. All three seemed most of the times. I even remember my teachers from school, they were leaving to go deer hunting, and like their hunting rifles were hanging in the rack on their pickup truck, exposed for everybody to see. There wasn't a lot of mass shootings. It certainly happened, but we weren't as sensitive to seeing those. I live in a city area now, and I feel like I have to move my firearms to my vehicle to transport it at night in the cover of, or disguise it as something, because people are automatically assuming that somehow that firearm is going to jump out and kill everybody around it. Okay? So there's a lot of paranoia right now associated with firearms. And I blame that on the media. I blame that on our politicians, who certainly have an agenda. And I blame that on ourselves, because we're not doing enough to educate those people around us. I have had discussions with people who I would consider, who at least I thought were very knowledgeable on the subject. They were like, yeah, well, nobody needs a 30-round magazine for an AR. That's a weapon of war. And I say, well, we're not allowed to have 30-round magazines. it's a centerfire rifle, and the magazines are capped at 5 rounds. Yeah, well, you could always, however it's capped, take the pin out, whatever. Remove that obstruction, and now you've got an overcapacity magazine. Well, that would be illegal, and that would be breaking the law. So I don't understand how you make more laws to support laws that aren't working. If the laws aren't working in the first place, and you're assuming that every single person out there who has a possession acquisition license that legally purchased their firearm, that has it in their home in storage until they're going to about the business of what they bought the firearm for, hunting, sport shooting, is immediately buying this firearm with that thought that I'm going to break the law and I'm going to remove the plug on the shotgun and I'm going to saw the barrel off. There is a lot of things that are illegal that you can't do with a firearm. Okay? So I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but I want to provide information, and I would advise you, if you can provide information as well, right? Try and open up that dialogue. Try and get that person who thinks they know what's going on because the media has said there's fully semi-automatic or whatever. If you can get that person, you can educate them or provide some statistics to show them why their line of thinking maybe isn't that. I'm not saying you have to go out there and change everybody's mind, but give them the information and maybe they'll change their mind themselves, and we'll stop feeling like we're constantly under attack to prove why we need these firearms. And I'll say need, okay? We don't need firearms. Nobody needs firearms, okay? I'm not living where I have to go out and hunt every day to make sure I have food on the table. But it's a hobby, it's a pastime. It's the same thing as riding a motorcycle or a snowmobile or going hiking or, all those things that are hobbies. There are dangers associated with each one of them, okay? As soon as you step out the door. In fact, even in your house, there are dangers associated with living in a house. But we know those, we educate ourselves, and we mitigate those risks by having that knowledge. So, I'm going to talk about classes of firearms in Canada. I'm going to talk about what is currently the classes, because I don't know where it's going, and I can't think even how there will be an existence of all 3 classes. There's a lot of talk about changing those classes as well. The government likes to talk about common sense gun laws. I have a hard time believing anything they say when common sense is used in the same sentence, because they certainly haven't proven with their track record recently that they know what common sense is. So, right now, what do we have? We have unrestricted. Okay, that's most of your long rifles for purposes of like hunting. So your 22 rimfire and your center fire rifles shotguns are all going to fit in that. Okay, provided that they don't have a device or a modification, even from the factory, that will put them into another. So look it up, but there's barrel length restrictions. There's a multitude of restrictions, but I will say most of your hunting, the ones that you can take out of your house and go to hunting, they're going to fall into the unrestricted category. Okay, restricted. Most of those are for sports shooting. Okay, what else falls into that category is all handguns. All handguns are restricted, although now they're banned for importation. So if you have one, you can still have one, but you can't go buy another one. So I don't know if that makes it prohibited for ownership, or is it still restricted but grandfathered? I'm not sure. And then, of course, there's prohibited, and those are the firearms that don't fit in either of the other 2 classes. Okay, so they're not sporting firearms, including handguns, and they're not hunting firearms. Okay, you can't use those, take them out. It used to be, I'll give you an example. Okay, so a short barrel pistol. Okay, so anything less than 4.5 inches or 106 millimeters to be precise would fall into the prohibited category now, but before it was just another restriction. Okay, so if you bought a handgun that had a 3-inch barrel, it would be a restricted handgun. Then the government decided that short barrels are really bad because you can conceal them easily, so we're now going to make them prohibited. All those people that owned already prohibited or short barrel pistols got grandfathered with that clause on their certificate. I'll explain the 2 licenses, saying that they could own firearms with shorter length than 106 millimeters. So you can have prohibited firearms. Like right now, the AR-15 in Canada is prohibited. Okay, you can't buy it. You can't go to the range with it. You can't do anything with it. Okay, they don't know what they're doing yet. Well, it's gearing towards mandatory buyback. All right. So you have those firearms. You also have prohibited devices. So anything, as I said, for magazine capacity, for instance, if you have a magazine that is not capped at 5 rounds for a center fire, then that's a prohibited device. Okay? And as well as suppressors, anything basically that the government has agreed with other political parties to say that no, those are too dangerous, we don't want them in civilian hands, blah blah blah, that's for law enforcement only. Things like bump stocks, that get all the news, that is, turns your semi-automatic into a fully automatic. That's not true. What it does is it gives you a mechanical advantage. It allows you to or allows the trigger to be pushed more rapidly than you could do with your finger. So it gives you a mechanical advantage, but it doesn't turn it into a fully automatic firearm. Changing a semi-automatic firearm into a fully automatic is also prohibited. Okay, so it's already against the law. And you can't buy the pieces. You can't buy anything like that. It's extremely difficult to do. In fact, the AR-15s that were being imported in Canada had to have the lower body of the carrier of that firearm, the lower of it, had to be modified so that it could not accept even like a milled piece. Of course, you could still go and mill it or whatever, but again, you can't do that. That's breaking the law. All right. So those are the 3 classes of firearms that we currently have. As I said, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I don't know if we're just going to have one class, basically, which I think the way that it's going is going to be a flintlock or a musket. I don't know. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, Bill C-21, which was a last-minute, 11th-hour amendment to their supposed assault rifle ban and handgun freeze, is basically going out there and every center fire rifle, shotguns, there's a ton. There's 400 pages of firearms that are going to be affected, as well as one paragraph that says basically anything that was originally designed to have a detachable magazine with more than 5 rounds is prohibited. So that's like 90% of semi-automatics out there right now, including, shotgun. All right. So that's enough about that for now. I'll let that soak in. And I know everybody out there has got their own views. And if you're like me, you probably have the same views. I'm going to try and keep it tactful and professional for one time in my life at least. So, you're a Canadian, you're 18 years old, and you want to own a firearm. For whatever reason. Okay, that's your personal reason. You're still allowed to choose that reason, whether it be for sports shooting, plinking, hunting, you name it. So what do you have to do? Well, that depends. That depends on what you want to purchase. Okay, so if you want to go and get a hunting rifle and start hunting, you need at the very least your PAL. Okay, so that's the Possession and Acquisition License. All right, so if you wanted to get into handgun sports shooting or just plinking at the range, even if with a .22 caliber pistol, then you need to get an RPAL, which is the Restricted Possession and Acquisition License. 2 separate courses. Okay, in order to get the RPAL, you have to do the PAL. So the first thing to do is book a course. Okay, look online, depending on what province that you live in. There should be a link from most of the outdoor federations. Shouldn't be that hard to find. But you have to attend the course. You have to actually physically go there and prove to them that you can handle a firearm safely. And when I did my course years and years and years ago, when my son did his course a few years ago, it hasn't changed very much, okay? They're going to talk about safety of a multitude of firearms, right down from a single break action shotgun all the way up to semi-automatic. Could be rimfire. They'll have a couple of examples of shotguns, center fire rifles. They'll discuss the dangerous parts of it, right? The pointy end, the point, or the area to which the round leaves the chamber going mock snot that could kill you. They're going to talk about all that. Rules for transportation, the equipment that you're going to need, how to care, how to maintain, all that. The course it used to last 3 days, but now I think they've condensed it down to 2 days. All right, so that's to own the firearm. Now, if you want to go hunting, you have to take another course, and that is delegated down to provincial authority, basically, on how what they consider the minimum training requirements are in order to do hunting. So there's a lot of similarities, but they do differ from province to province. Okay, so book the course, pass the course. You're 18 years old. Now you have to fill out the paperwork to submit that to the RCMP, Chief Firearms Officer. Okay, it could be different. 90% of the time it's going to be the RCMP. So that goes to the Miramichi, okay, and it's filled out. References, where you've lived for the last 10 years, and if you're going for an RPAL, then it's even more in depth. 5 references, people who have known you for years and years and years. If you have an ex-spouse, you have to list that person on there. They're going to take their time, and believe me, they are going to call your references, and they are going to interview them. They're going to talk to them. They're going to make sure that you're not a danger to yourself or to the public regarding firearms. Now, if everything checks out and you're good to go, eventually you're going to get a card, your certificate, your possession acquisition license. Now you can finally go to a gun shop and you can purchase a firearm. They now need to fill out a transfer with a number and basically, I'm not going to say register, but record the sale of that firearm. And they have to keep those records for 10 years, I believe it is. Okay. So that's basically how you purchase non-restricted. Again, for an RPAL, it's much more in depth. Okay, they go through all your references. They go further into your history. They check you out on the Canadian Police Information Center website or Police Information Network. And that basically, if you've ever been convicted of a crime, you could be refused. All right. So you've gone and done all that. You have a firearm. You have to have a safe. You have to have a place to store it. You have to have a place. If you went into restricted, then obviously you have to have an authority to transport. That means you've informed the CFO, listen, I have range practice Monday or Wednesday, or I usually go on the weekends. It's between this time and this time. These are the firearms that I'm bringing. And he'll check all that out. And he will send you a certificate, which you have to have on your possession, on your person, in your possession at all times, that authorizes you to bring that firearm. If you go to a gunsmith, you have to have an authority to transport. Okay, so that's how that works. All right, and for the most part, it works well. I mean, it's a lot of bureaucracy, it's a lot of red tape, but legal firearm owners, we're pretty compliant. We will, okay, I understand. This is the rules you want us to follow in order for me to enjoy my pastime, enjoy my sport, whether it be hunting or sport shooting. We'll do it, okay? Because we want to enjoy that. We want to enjoy it responsibly. So governments talk about common sense laws, and there are some that are common sense. I do believe in gun control. There are certain aspects of gun control that do work, right? Red flag laws is certainly one of them. Background checks, mandatory for everybody. I believe that, okay? Criminals should not have guns. Criminals shouldn't be allowed to buy guns legally. And most of them don't. And that's where I'm going next. Okay. So this is the part that I kind of wanted to do but didn't want to do. It's the new amendment. And I already talked about this, what is coming to be in Canada. and why I think it's a terrible waste of resources and a ridiculous overstep on the government's part. So what they're saying is, and there's a couple of special interest groups that are certainly campaigning hard in order for this to pass, but what they're saying is, I'm the problem. Okay? Violence has risen in Canada and probably most other countries in the last, since 2016. I think it's gone up 62%, and gun-related crime has gone up 92% in some of the larger cities. So there's an increase. So the government says, here's how we're going to fix that increase in crime, because we need to do something about this. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. And I'm going to give you some of the statistics that I looked at last night. So in 2021, there was almost 500,000 incidents of violent crime in Canada. All right, so some of those are going to be, knives, baseball bats, I don't know, kitchen utensils, corkscrews, chairs, baseball bats, golf clubs, and firearms. Okay, those are every single incident is going to be taken, and Statistics Canada doesn't do a very good job of I'm going to say narrowing that down to find the root cause, but that's not really their job. That's up to the government if they're trying to pass a law to determine and to do research into what those statistics show and to kind of bring up laws and bills that are going to help this situation. So almost 500,000. Okay, so of that 500,000, they said, how many involved firearms? Of that 500,000, it was like 4,800 for 2021. So let's say 5,000 of those involved firearms. They could also be suicides. So all of those stats basically are lumped together. So they got that 5,000. They said, okay, so of that 5,000, how many resulted in homicides? Of the 5,000, it was like 470. So let's say 500 again. Okay, so of the 5,000, we're down to 500. Okay, so 10%. 500 involved homicides from firearms. Sorry. 500 of those violent incidents of the 5,000 involved firearms. How many of those resulted in death? Homicide. Again, suicide is tracked in that as well. Of those 5,000, 500, I'm getting my figures mixed up. Of those 500, there was 87. Okay, 87 or 90. Let's say 100. Again, just to keep the math easy. So, they got down to 100. How many of those were from people that actually had legal firearms? 13. Okay, so starting up at 500,000, we're down to 13. Out of 500,000, we have 13 homicides, and that could be suicides, that involved firearms, but yet the government, at least in my eyes, with the application of this change, this C-21, where they're saying we're taking guns off the streets, and no longer can you buy firearms, no longer can you buy, well, you can buy certain firearms that aren't on the list yet. But, handgun sports shooting, they've recognized 2 organizations that are allowed to purchase, that are getting an exemption on buying handguns. The Olympic and Paralympic. How do you become an Olympic shooter if you've never had an opportunity to grow into that sport? That's like saying the only people that can drive cars are Formula One drivers. The only people that can play hockey are NHL players. How do you take a 10-year-old and bring him up to be NHL level? You can't, unless there's some kind of growth program. So there's other organizations that have asked for an exemption. I don't know if it's going to happen. Nobody knows if it's going to happen, because the government is focused on getting those 13 suicides that were from legal firearm owners from the original 500,000 violent offenses in Canada. We're focused on the 13. Just write that down and look at that and see if that makes sense to you. They're going to spend $2 billion buying back firearms from owners that have never had a problem. And I know that they've never had a problem because my information is run through the CPIC every day. I'm checked every single day to make sure I'm still a safe and responsible gun owner. We are the most vetted population in Canada. Nobody else goes through this. How is this a good, effective effort? How can you expect to get results? And then at the same time, they reduce sentences on violent criminal offenders that they thought specifically was targeting minority groups. And you don't have to go very far. We just had a recent police officer, that was shot responding to a vehicle in the ditch call that was ambushed by somebody, shot, killed with an illegal firearm. This guy has been prohibited for years now of owning legal firearms because he's a violent criminal. But we had him out on bail. He was supposed to show up in September. He was released on recognizance and he didn't show. So there was an active warrant for this guy. Anyway, the criminals are the problem. It's not legal gun owners. I don't know where this is going. I wish I had some answers. I wish I had a crystal ball. I know that it's going to affect, I've got family members that own firearms stores. I've got friends and family that are sport shooter enthusiasts. It's going to affect everybody. And even if you happen upon this video, and even if you are not a firearms owner, and you are completely against firearms, just think of the implications where a government can just, without any kind of evidence, because there's always political procedure, right? Before you pass a law, it has to go through the House of Commons. Well, they skipped all that with the OIC. They said it's a matter of public safety, right? Can't have those firearms out there. Even though, you know how many AR-15s have been used in a homicide in the last 10 years in Canada? 0 by legal firearm owners. 0. Okay? So, legal firearm owners are not the problem. We never have been. We've always followed all the rules, the laws, everything that's been asked of us, for decades and decades and decades. I don't know what the answer is. I wish somebody in the government, and it sounds like there might be an inkling, and maybe there's a small light on the horizon, because a lot of these MPs that are representing rural communities, okay, especially up north where you have a lot of the indigenous people, they say, that what we keep on hearing is, well, an SKS is a weapon of war. Right, well, I mean, all firearms were at some time a weapon of war. A musket was used as a weapon of war. It was used on the battlefield. Every firearm was designed that way, if you really, unless it's like a .22, and some .22s have been used in conflicts. So, it's a weapon of war, but what is its current use? Its current use is being used for hunting. The SKS, a lot of indigenous, especially northern indigenous communities, they have to deal with the reality that we don't have here in urban living. And one of them is they have a real fear of polar bears coming into their village and like taking their livestock or their family members that are friends. So they have actually polar bear patrols. And if I'm doing a patrol against a polar bear, I want something semi-automatic. I don't want fire, cock the action, like, oh, where is he now? No. I want something I can get a second round on as quick as possible. So, a lot of these elders and a lot of the rural communities have spoken up to their MPs. There's a lot of letters out there that exist. You can get a pre-formed letter. All you have to do basically is fill out your name, address it to your individual MP, and I encourage you to do that if you're in Canada. And I mean, for my viewers in the U.S., if you guys think you have it bad, wow. I mean, God love your Constitution. I really wish we had a document that protected our rights here in Canada. It seems like the government is finding a way. I hate to keep repeating that, but it's turned into an argument. Prove to me why you need it, instead of an argument which be prove to me why I've done anything wrong to take it away, and none. Very, very, very rare. Every shooting incident or every violent crime incident recently, 99.9% of the time, it's a criminal or it's a crazy person, and it's 99.999% of the time is somebody that shouldn't have any firearms at all. So they're gonna eventually they'll release more details. I think it's in limbo right now, just because some of the even the Liberal MPs are kind of backing out of the amendment. So it's a little bit underhanded, I think, to do it in the 11th hour. I mean, there's procedure, right? Commons procedure. And you bring up a law that you want to introduce, you debate it, it passes, they make minor changes to it, so that they can get more of the MPs on agreement. Because those are our representatives. These are the ones that are supposed to be speaking on our behalf. And there certainly are a few of them speaking on behalf of legal gun owners, but not enough. Too much influence by the media, too much influence of, especially the media down south. I mean, people think that, in Canada, it's just like Arizona. You can go into any gun store and just fill out the form and buy a license. And it's not. It's extremely difficult. It takes some actual time before you can actually have a license and get a legal firearm in Canada. And we're okay with that. I mean, we've been living that way for quite some time now, and I don't want anybody to have firearms either. I don't want the criminals to have firearms. All right? So give the police the tools they need in order to put them in jail, and then give the justice system the tools they need in order to keep them in jail. All right, so that's all I've got. I'm going to apologize for going off the rails on this, but it's something, and this is a difficult thing to have a conversation about it, is because we're passionate about it. It's something we grew up with. It's something that we value. We want to pass on to our kids. And so it's really difficult to not take it personally. So I'm going to apologize. I didn't think I was going on a rant, and I hope I didn't. But in the same sense, I hope I provided some information out there, especially my American viewers. You can see how difficult it is here in Canada to get a firearm and to legally, use it, whatever the purpose, hunting, sport shooting. And for my Canadian viewers, if you happen to come upon this and you're anti-gun, give it some time, listen to what I'm saying to you, talk to your friends, do some real research before you make a solid decision that impacts millions of people with no statistics to support that, okay? We are not a threat to public safety. I'm certainly not, and I don't know. Go to a range. That's what I would say. My final thought on that. Go to a range. If you have a friend, I would take anybody out to the range, all right? It is an amazing atmosphere. People are so friendly. I mean, they're passionate, again, about what they do. They want to share that passion with you. They'll talk to you about it. It's a real following and a real family. As soon as you join a range, you feel like you belong to that range. Again, I'm the guy with the beard, guns, and gear. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm sorry if I talked your ear off. If you're still watching this, kudos to you for putting up with me for that long. Like, subscribe, follow, and have a wonderful day.